If you're ready to experience more peace and joy in your life, if you want to feel more comfortable in your own skin, and if you're ready to discover and expand on your energetic gifts and personal power, you're in the right place. So here's your host, Kelle Sparta.
Welcome back to Spirit Guides. I'm your host, Kelle Sparta, transformational shaman and spiritual business coach. I am here as always on Wednesday Align programs with my best friend in Boquete, Katherine Loranger. And she is also a wonderful spiritual business coach. And the two of us together are going to talk to you today about, am I just being compassionate or am I being a doormat? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is one I think everyone can relate to. Because you try to be an understanding person and try to understand what's going on, and sometimes makes you a great boss, and sometimes that makes you a doormat depending upon how you do it. And so people will take advantage if you don't have good boundaries is really what it comes down to. So I'm going to give my take on it, and then I'm going to let you loose because you and I come at it from very different perspectives a lot of times, which I love. And so long ago, I used to consider myself, and I still very much consider myself, one of the most understanding people you'll ever meet. I understand why everybody does what they do. I am very good at understanding. I am particularly good at seeing what the reasons are behind what's happening in front of me. But quite a few years back at this point, I hit the point where I was like, wait a minute, I am understanding, but I'm getting beaten up by this process. I used to take pride in being the most understanding person you'll ever meet. And when you take pride in something, that's when the pride goeth before a fall, right? When you take pride in something, it's because you've made it part of your identity. And I made that part of my identity, and I was getting walked on a lot as a result. And so what I realized was I will never be at a place where I don't understand what's happening in front of me. However, I have come to a place where I'm like, look, I will be this much less understanding than I am treated well. And that rule has served me so well in my life, because I can understand you forever. But if you are walking on me, if you're beating me up, if you're treating me badly, I am not putting up with that. I may understand, but I won't be understanding, right? I will not allow the behavior, right? So if you've been a wonderful human to me 99% of the time, and you have a bad day where you snap and you're a total bitch to me, then I'm going to probably give you a pass, but I still am going to ask for an apology, right? But if you're like not being a reasonable human, I can understand till the cows come home. But if you're beating me up in the process, I'm not going to allow that. Right. So that's the differential in my book, is what is it that you allow versus what is it that you understand? Right. Because, you have to be able to still be a good boss. You have to still be able to, it's one thing to say, yes, I get that this is going on, but it doesn't mean that you let them walk all over you. If they just don't show up for work, or they just don't do what they're supposed to do, or they don't, whatever, there's a limit to how much you will put up with from that. Right. And even if the excuses are good ones, if they're constant, you can't run a business that way. Right. So that's kind of my short take on it. So I'm going to let you go now, because I see you taking all kinds of notes.
Oh yes, I've got, just to kind of tweak my brain, get it going here. So, I think you nailed it, Kelle, when it's all about boundaries, right? And from a business perspective, I think yes, we can be understanding, we can understand, we can be compassionate. And for the people listening to this podcast, like, yes, you are naturally that person, right? You're drawn to this work. And you need to ask the question, what does my business need from me?
Yeah.
I'm going to say that again because it's so powerful. What does my business need from me? Who does it require me to be? So if I kind of taking that compassion and that understanding, and I'm not holding people to account. I'm not holding people, kind of responsible for their actions, their outcomes, their contracts, their agreements, then I am not giving my business what it needs to grow and flourish. And so, if I'm understanding that a client is, having a rough month and can't make their payment that month, that's one thing, but then my business is suffering as a result of that.
Right.
If I'm understanding that, yes, and there's levels, right? So maybe like somebody had a death in the family. Well, that's not something that happens all that often. But like you said, if they're continually showing up in a way that's consistent, you are teaching them how to treat you. You are teaching them what you will and what you will not put up with. And so getting really clear on how am I accountable to my business? And then how do I hold those people around me accountable? And yes, I can be compassionate, I can be understanding, but you're separating the the kind of what's going on from how you show up. Your worth, your value is not tied to being compassionate, being understanding. If you are in a position where you are overextending yourself or your business, then you're not. And so, wow, my brain just like went away. That's why I took all those notes. My brain was like, wait a minute, what are we going to talk about right here? So you're not, you're kind of energetically, you've got all of these like holes in your business, right, that are siphoning out. So you're letting your power, really in the power of your business, dissolve and disperse. And so what would it be like? And as I'm talking, like, you're going to know, you're going to be thinking, oh yeah, there's that client, there's that employee, there's that situation, there's that time that this happened, or there's this way that I'm still doing it right now, where you're letting your power dissolve and diffuse. So what would it be like to actually pull that back, to notice, where have I made agreements that are not empowering to myself and my business? And then what would it look like to show up as the woman, the man, the person who is running that successful business that I would love? What would it look like to be compassionate and hold people accountable for their actions and behaviors and decisions? And so what would it be like to be in a both and? So we're not saying, okay, now you need to be, kind of non-compassionate. Now you need to like dump your empathy, because those are very, very good skills to have. But what would it look like to be empathetic and, right?
Yeah.
Instead of either or.
Yeah. And, there's, one of the biggest reasons why people get walked on is because they're conflict averse, right? They don't want to create conflict. As a boss, you have to be okay with creating conflict, because if you can't confront somebody about problems that you're having with them, then you're just going to create all kinds of problems in your business. And it doesn't have to be conflict. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you can look at an employee who's been a good employee and is suddenly not doing what they're supposed to do and say, "Hey, are you okay?" Right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
not conflict. That's, "Hey, are you okay? Because, you're dropping this and you're dropping that, and what's going on? Talk to me." Right? Because if you're not happy in your role, or if there's something going on at home, I need to know. Do you need help? Are you overwhelmed? Talk to me about what's happening. Right? And the other piece is, the whole hire, slow, fire fast, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
that if you have somebody who comes in and they are not a fit, you need to get rid of them fast, quickly, like
Mm-hmm.
super fast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they will damage your company culture. They will damage your employee relationships, or your client relationships. They will damage everything they touch if they're a
Mm-hmm.
bad hire. So, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, I don't want to fire somebody and they're relying on my income." And blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, you got to fire them. It is not your problem. It's not your fault that they didn't work out, unless you didn't train them. And we'll talk about that in another time. But it's not your fault they didn't work out. If they didn't do their job, that's on them. And them not having an income is because they didn't do their job. It's not your fault, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to, one of the things that happens a lot, especially with spiritual people, is that we take responsibility for everything. And,
Mm-hmm.
you can't take responsibility for somebody else's performance.
Mm-hmm.
So, we'll do another episode where we talk about hiring and what that's about and training and all of the pieces. But, know that if you're doing a good job on those pieces and the person isn't working out, that is not your fault. They have to be able to follow instructions and actually want to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
So, the one of the hardest things is to fire somebody. And, being able to be with that and just be like, nope, we're done is it's hard, but it's necessary. And it's such a relief when you do it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When you have a bad hire on staff and you have to let them go, you dread it. So I'm going to say just don't dread, just do, right? Just, let them go, be done. Because the moment you're done, the relief is so palpable. It's just like, oh my God, that's so good to be relieved, right? So, yes, it's hard, but face it, do it fast, do it first.
Mm-hmm.
Don't sit and dread it. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
because it's that, right? It's the boundaries, it's the energy, it's your power in your business. So if you've got this like person who is not a fit, and and I think my kind of default is to always, the first filter is, okay, what's my role here? Is there something I did or didn't do? Is there, I mean, there's always a lesson, right? Is there growth here for me? But don't belabor that point. Like if they're not a fit, yes, like you've maybe done the pieces that you need to do, but then just make that decision and move on, because when you let it go on, like you said, it poisons everything about your business. And then you got this energy drain, right? So if you're moving forward with your business and you've got this nice cohesive energy that's happening, and then you've got bits where you're diffusing it, you're not going to get any traction, you're not going to get any momentum.
Yeah. And, it gives the rest of your employees, or even contractors, because most of us are going to be working with contractors. It gives them the idea that they can fuck about too, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's like if
yeah,
somebody's not
yeah.
doing their job and they're getting away with it, then everybody else is going to stop doing their job, right? So that's I'm doing a production right now for Mamma Mia. We're doing a show, and we when you have somebody who is not off book by the time everybody else was supposed to be off book, then they're giving permission to everybody else to not do it. And I'm finding myself pulling people aside and saying, "You're supposed to be off book."
Mm-hmm.
And this is a volunteer position and I'm still holding them accountable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it says multiple things. One is, it says it's not fair for you to do this when everybody else it doesn't get to. So that's keeping a level playing field. But it also says I'm noticing what you're doing and what you're not doing. And it's important to me to notice that. And so I'm noticing and therefore paying attention to you, which is it's an importance piece for people. If you don't notice, if you're abdicating responsibility for supervising somebody and you're not saying anything when they don't get the job done, then you're telling them basically that what they're doing isn't important. It's not important to you because you're not following up with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and therefore they don't feel like what they do is important, and therefore they don't have any investment in it because you don't have any investment in it, right? So, there's a reason why we hold people accountable and we call them up to be the person that we need them to be. And that
Mm-hmm.
causes them to be drawn up into a higher vibration, to be drawn up into a higher level of service, into a higher level of being. And I'm not saying, you be the boss, because that does not
Mm-mm.
work. Okay.
Mm-mm. No.
Boss is I'm gonna make you scared of me in order, and there's no loyalty in being scared. There's never loyalty. You will get minimum required effort if you do scare based tactics or anger based tactics. So this is the other piece of having to learn to speak early, speak often, right? Don't wait until you're pissed off at them to say something. you know
Mm-hmm.
the moment you start to see things slipping, you start asking, everything okay, right? Because you want to be proactive about it, not wait until you're so rip shit pissed that you're going to rip them a new asshole. That is not that is not going to be healthy for anybody, right? And in some situations, so for instance, I'm in the process of hiring a virtual assistant out of the Philippines. They will not put up with that. They will just ghost you. they will disappear, because culturally that is not an acceptable thing. And the same thing here in Panama, you know, there's just they are super conflict averse culturally here. And so, you know, if you're hiring from another country, you know, you've really got to be aware of the cultural differences. And we'll talk about that as well. But you have to like speak up and just be like, okay, so this didn't work. And let's talk about why, and let's make a plan so that it will work in the future. Right. That is a collaborative process where you're not shaming and blaming, where you're saying, okay, is there something wrong with our system? How are we fixing it? What's going on? Da 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 da. Right. All of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be willing to be part of the solution. And when you've done that, you have to be willing to let them go, right? If they're still not getting it done. So, you know, I always assume that it's a systemic issue the first time.
Mm.
Okay. First time there's a problem, it's a systemic issue and it's my fault because there's not a good system in place. Okay. You didn't get sufficient training. You didn't get sufficient systems. You don't have an understanding of your job, whatever. First time, it's always my fault. Second time, I'm going to be saying, okay, did we have a misunderstanding? Was everything not clear? You know, what's going on? Because, you know, we had this conversation, you got this training. What's missing for you? So it's going to be a question. Third time, I'm going to be like, this is not acceptable. And this needs to be addressed. And this is a you thing at this point, because I've given you the first two were me and then us. Now it's you, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and when it's
Mm-hmm.
a you, if they don't have a really good answer, that's probably we're done. If it's happening in the beginning of their employment. If it's
Mm-hmm.
not the beginning of their employment, they've been with me for a while, I've really liked what they're doing, then it's going to be okay, what's going on? Are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is not acceptable. And anybody who's been a good employee who's having that happen is going to be like, I know, I'm so sorry. I wish, I don't know. You know, I'm having this issue or that issue or the other issue. And you can be like, okay, well, let's see if we can work it out, because if we can't work it out, this is not going to work out. And they're going to understand that if they're a good employee, right? Good contractor. So these are the things to sort of think about and the ways to approach it. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Just that if, sorry, I've got like a fly here. It's like, if I'm like doing this, I'm not seeing things like an actual fly. I think that I believe that how we show up in business is how we show up in life. So if you are not experiencing the quality of relationships that you would love in the rest of your life, that's going to be showing up in your business as well, right? You're not one person here and then a totally different person here. And so the benefit of that is that you can actually learn and develop. So maybe you don't have employees yet. Maybe you're growing your business, right? You can start to practice that stuff and notice that stuff in your other relationships in your life. So am I actually teaching people that I don't need to be treated with respect? Am I teaching people that my time is not important? Am I teaching people that my voice doesn't matter? So where in other parts of your life, again, if it's not showing up in your business just yet, is this showing up? And then you can practice them there. And really stepping into being the leader in your business. So when you're leading your clients, you're leading your contractors, your employees, is going to require practice. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to screw up. You're going to, some things you're going to do really well, and some things you're going to just want to bang your head against the wall because you're not proficient yet, right? So as you are noticing the areas where maybe you have in the past been a doormat and now you're stepping into greater levels of personal power and accountability, have some compassion for yourself, right? You've got that compassion for other people, and you can hold them to account, and then also give that back to yourself, not as an excuse. So you're not saying, oh, like I'm just trying, I'm just doing my best, I'm just practicing. But okay, so that didn't go the way that I wanted it to. So let me get curious about, how did I show up in that situation that I'm proud of? How did I show up in a way that is in alignment with the vision of who it is that I want to become? Because if you don't have that vision, you really don't have a target. You don't know what direction you're going. So you can assess, you can get curious about, okay, where was I in alignment? Where was I not? What am I proud of in terms of how I showed up there? So am I proud that I just tried? Am I proud that there was just like one little sentence that felt really good? Am I proud of the outcome? Am I proud of how I, just went through the process? And then what are the areas that I would love to improve? And then what is my specific game plan to do that? So we're not looking at excuses. We're not looking at, well, I was a kid, I grew up like this and my parents are like this, and this is my, kind of preferred communication style, and I'm risk averse and da da da. Like that's all over there. What is my plan, my very specific game plan as the boss of this company, as the boss of myself, to shift my results? Because when you're in business, it is about results.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm going to add one more thing, because you made a good point of somebody who doesn't have employees yet. I want to talk about, boundaries with your clients, right? Because,
Mhm.
you can be a massive doormat with your clients, especially as a coach, right? Because it's so easy to have somebody reach out on text or, messenger or whatever, right? And they've paid for X amount of time, but now they're like draining so much extra time by like sending you text after text after text. If you have somebody, I used to have a client who would send me a bunch of texts in a day, right? And I finally had to put my foot down and say, look, if you're spiraling, I am not your person, right? When you're spiraling, you need to contact your therapist. I am
Mhm.
not your therapist, right? I am your coach. There's a difference. And
Mhm.
if you're spiraling out of control, and you can't stop until you get yourself back on your feet, you need to talk to your therapist for that. That's a boundary, right? And you and I both know that nothing I say, because I did respond to the texts initially, right? I
Mhm.
was like, okay, because we know every client has a meltdown every now and again, right?
Yeah.
No big deal, right? So initially I would respond, right? But I discovered that absolutely nothing I said was going to make a difference, because she was in a spiral, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so I'm like, look, I am not your spiral person,
Mhm.
because this does not have a positive outcome for either of us. And it makes me crazy.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
I can't have 26 texts coming in an hour, right? Um,
Mhm. Yeah.
and and nothing I'm gonna say is gonna make a difference. So there's no point in having this communication happen,
Mhm.
because you're spiraling. And so you need to learn how to self-soothe, or you need
Mhm.
to talk to your therapist about developing some skills around that, because that is not what I do as a coach, right?
Mhm.
And so sometimes you just got to set a boundary like that. I'm happy to do a conversation with somebody who's having the occasional meltdown, because that's part of my job, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Absolutely. But, when you've discovered that something's not going to be productive, then you need to put your foot down and say, if it's not going to be productive, then I need to not be involved,
Mm,
right?
mhm. Well, and that clarity in terms of like, what is your offer? What is your background? What is your competency? What are your skills, right? Because you can actually do someone harm if
Yes.
you are stepping into areas of work that are not they're not your areas of competence, right? So you want to be really mindful and really careful about roles, boundaries, expectations, and you want to set that up early and you want to repeat as necessary. And same, right? I am, for my clients, if they're, because part of the process of stepping into a new identity is that the old one has to dissolve, right?
Right.
And your comfort zone, your current thinking, your current patterns are going to fight for their existence. And so there's a requirement, there's going to be a part of that process where you're going to feel, right? We actually call it DEF CON. Like it's that intense. We have a name for it, and I let people know it's coming for you. And so, we're getting the skills along the way to manage that. That's part of the coaching. But if the DEF CON hits, like, yes, reach out,
Right.
right? Reach out, because we know that it's a breakthrough point.
Right.
But if someone is, and in our next episode, we're going to talk about spiritual laws and we'll get more into vibration, right? But as a coach, like, you are attracting your clients by your vibration. So if your vibration is, I am available to you 24/7, right? And I don't have any boundaries, guess who
Right.
you're going to attract? People who are in alignment with that. So that's
Right.
our next episode, is spiritual laws. So definitely tune into that one.
Yeah. So, and that's the other piece of the puzzle too, is having good boundaries around that too. And part of that is about how you work, and in terms of timing. right? And setting people's expectations. So like, I'm doing the Sacred Profits program and I'm working with people on their businesses. I am not available on the weekends. It is a business-based process and I am available 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. weekdays. That is how that is, because otherwise people are going to be texting me all weekend, all night, all day. I never get a day off. It just never happens, right? So there's no point in doing that. We can hear that, just so you know.
Okay, sorry. Somebody like literally drove by my house. My dogs are doing their job.
Yeah. Good job, dogs.
Good job, dogs. Good job, dogs.
Buen trabajo. So
Good job. Okay. Come.
Yeah. So if you're not setting the boundaries, you're gonna have to mute. So if you're not setting the boundaries, then you're gonna get people trying to communicate with you at all hours, right? And you don't want to do that because you don't get any time off. You don't get any break. You don't get a chance to reset and be reasonable as a human and, have time off. So, this is something that is, I think, probably one of the biggest challenges that a lot of people have when they start running their business is that they do work 24/7, especially when you come out of an environment where your only value is through what you do. And then you try to take downtime and you don't know what you're going to do on your downtime. And now you're just working all the time because you're like, well, I don't know what to do. I don't feel like watching TV and I don't have anything else planned. So I'll just work some more. It's like, that's what happens. And then you end up working so much that you get burned out. And when you get burned out, you will shut down the flow of new clients because you are too tired to deal with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All of these things and more are the reason to avoid. Okay.
And there are times and cycles in your business where you're going to, it's going to require more output. Absolutely. And you want to balance that, right? So that's another topic, but there's so many spin-offs on this one.
Which is why we're doing a freaking
all
podcast.
The things.
That's why this is a podcast. Right. Yes. Okay. So we've been pretty far afield in this one, but this doormat thing, the compassion versus doormat thing, really goes across every aspect of your life and your business. And so we've sort of run wide and far on this one, but it's necessary. No. So, all right. I think that's good. You good?
Yeah. Well, just one more thing. So, so for our listeners, if this is resonating with you, I'm going to just leave you with a question for your own kind of exploration, maybe journaling on it, meditating on it, is what is your worst fear if you did set a boundary? Like, what's the worst thing that could happen, or how could that, right? Because typically we're not setting boundaries because we're afraid we're not going to be loved. We're not going to be safe. We're not going to be secure. And so bringing that into the light is going to be part of the process of allowing you to actually like release it and step into the kind of person that you're here to become.
Awesome.
Okay.
Fantastic. And that's all we have for you today. Tune in tomorrow for the Thursday Thoughts, and we'll be back next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. And don't forget that what you focus on expands. What you intend is what you create. So choose wisely. Have a great one.
So that's it for today's episode of Spirit Guides Podcast. Head on over to iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen and subscribe to the show. Every week, one lucky listener who subscribes and posts a review on iTunes will be entered into a drawing for a $10,000 value grand prize and a private reading with Kelle Sparta herself. Be sure to head on over to spiritguidespodcast.com and pick up a free copy of Kelle's gift and join us on the next episode.